We will certainly dive into that. And look, I think in a lot of ways, that is the biggest story, frankly, coming out of the Big Ten week is what a challenging weekend it was for Nebraska. Let's dive into today's big story, and it is those week 0 results. Northwestern scoring the game's final 14 points to top Nebraska in Dublin. Cats rolling up more than 500 yards of offense for just the second time in their last 55 games, dropping Scott Frost to 5-21 in one-score games in his Nebraska tenure. Illinois leaving very little doubt, demolishing Wyoming in Champaign. And again, I get that it's Scott Frost that was trending on Twitter, guys. I get all that stuff. But I do think we'll get to Nebraska for sure, and it's a huge story. But let's give a ton of credit to Northwestern. I mean, they were a non-competitive football team a year ago, and for them to come out and play as well as they did in their opener, really, in some ways, on both sides of the ball. What's your biggest takeaway from watching Pat Fitzgerald's team?
My biggest takeaway, because I think a lot of people were really excited about Ryan Helinski, and rightfully so. I mean, he had a great day. But it was those last 15 runs. They just ran the ball, the last 15 offensive snaps. And they were just the more physical team. You could see Nebraska was tired. We saw, how many shots did we see of them sort of with their hands up and just breathing really heavily? But you could just, the physicality was so apparent, and the way that they could just do what they wanted to do on the field and in the run game with, to run the game out. I just thought that was really, really remarkable and really impressive. And that's what you want in the Big Ten. You want to be able to do that to ice away the game.
Coach Anderson, offensive line, I mean, they did an unbelievable job. So much so that Coach Frost really talked about it in his post-game press conference, talking about just how physical this Northwestern team was. And I'm telling you, Dave, we've talked about this. I walked away from Northwestern, and I was like, I don't see it. I just don't see how they're going to do it. As far as being physical, as far as being talented, to put up 500 yards, over 500 yards of total offense, was unbelievable. You have to give that team a lot of credit. And I think the other thing that was really important, defensively, they gave up some big plays, but then they came back and made big plays that they needed to when it had to happen. And the special teams, the onside kick, that was big too, but give Northwestern a lot of credit being prepared to recover.
And the punting.
Oh, man,
Luke Akers was phenomenal.
Unbelievable.
He was phenomenal. That punt,
a huge weapon.
With like 2 minutes left to just put the game away. I mean, incredible.
Right. No, they clearly are going to be a lot better in field position battles than they were a year ago. You mentioned, I mean, Howard, Nebraska ran them over last year, 427 rushing yards. They had the one big touchdown run. But other than that, man, that Northwestern defense was really good. Yeah. That defensive front, Pat Fitzgerald told us when we were at practice, we have gotten better at the point of attack on defense, and that was apparent as we watched that game.
Felt like they were banged up last year, so they really couldn't raise their level that they needed to be at. But even on that big, long run, the linebacker was in place. He just got juked. The corner would have been able to make the tackle for a 10-yard gain maybe. It wouldn't have gone for a touchdown. But it happened, and that's one of those plays where you have some of your best players make a mistake, but they're still able to bounce back and make big plays later in the game. So they're able to, as Fitz would say a couple years ago, flush it. They were able to flush it and go out and make a play.
Yeah, flush the entire season from last year as well. Yeah. Look, are they a great team? I don't know whether they're a great team or not. I mean, Illinois beat Nebraska in the season opener last year. They were an improved team. They weren't a great team. But when you look at where Northwestern was a year ago, and you look at their most competitive games in the Big Ten, this was far and away would have been their best game they played last year, and no other one would have been in the team picture.
Well, and it's the 500 yards of offense, right? I mean, they nearly had 200-yard rushers. I mean, these were just things that they could not do. It looked so hard to move the ball last year. Yeah. So that's where I think you've got to have a ton of optimism. Again, we kind of went through this exact same thing in week 0 last year. But I do think, if that's what you're coming away from as a Northwestern fan, you should be excited because you weren't sure that this was possible. You didn't know that all these things could work together at the same time and put up that much offense.
And I think we're kind of glossing over Helinski and the job he did.
He was great.
He had some unbelievable throws. Donnie Navarro, who comes up from Illinois, former walk-on at Illinois, comes over as a grad transfer, makes big plays for him. They had quite a few players step up in the passing game. And, again, it goes back to that offensive line. Yes, they were able to run the ball when they needed to. You talk about salting the game away at the end. They did that. But they also kept the quarterback upright where he was able to throw it down the field.
314 passing yards, most for a Northwestern quarterback since 2018. All right, let's get to the Nebraska portion of it. We'll certainly talk a lot more about the Wildcats as the week goes on. But Nebraska, it feels like the same old story, right? I mentioned now 5-21 in the one-score games under Scott Frost. This was the onside kick heard around the world. I mean, the amount of discussion about Scott Frost's decision has been staggering here in the last couple of days. Is this the same old story, or do you come away with some hope for Nebraska?
I don't think you can watch that game and not think it's the same old story. Just in a new season, a new quarterback, because still throwing interceptions late in the game that kind of take away your chance to win it. Still defensive lapses, and again, an offense that we didn't think much of, really doing whatever they wanted through the air and on the ground. But it's so easy in this game to just look at that onside kick and go before and after, right? Because in the moment, I think there was a lot of people watching at home saying, I don't know why they're doing that. Like, why are you doing that? You have all the momentum. Why give them a short field? You don't know that Northwestern's going to have all the 14 unanswered points and win the game, but you knew that was a pivotal moment in the game. So when, we say, we talk a lot about the coach and Scott Frost's name is the one that's trending. Well, it's because that was a coach's decision to do. And he said after the game, looking back, he wouldn't have done it. And so it's so hard not to go there because so much has changed, right? You've had different assistant coaches. You have different players. We saw some flashes of those potential breakout players, but it was the same result where as soon as the game got dicey, they did not know how to win that game. They did not know how to shake off. We were talking about Northwestern shaking stuff off. They could not do that.
You talk about what Coach Frost talked about being aggressive, coaching aggressive, being aggressive. He had told his players that we're going to be aggressive in this game. And that was part of the aggression, right? Trying to go for that onside kick. To me, when I think about trying to get an onside kick and really be able to execute it, to me, it's about those guys in the front line who you believe that are not going to be anticipating it. And if I show you this really quickly, to me, when a guy is in the front line and he turns his shoulders this way to leave early before the ball is kicked, that tells me I can execute an onside kick. You look at the Northwestern guys, they're sitting there. They're sitting in perfect position. It's not even close, and they feel the play. But I think this is the pressure that I think Coach Frost and internally has on himself because they just want to make things happen. They want to put this game away, and they just haven't been able to do it.
Here's what I wonder about, too. I was thinking about this today. So Scott Frost has given up most of the play calling duties, right, to Mark Whipple, and he's used to being the one in charge. And so now this was a chance where he sensed Northwestern was vulnerable, and it was a chance to put his stamp on it, to say this was a decision that I made, won us the game. And it's interesting because I do think in the moment it seemed like a very strange decision, and that's what you're saying. But so did Northwestern's decision to go for it on 4th and 1. It's deep in its own territory, like in its own 35-yard line in the final minutes of the first half when they were trailing in the game, and you thought that they were trying to draw Nebraska offside, and then they executed a quarterback sneak, converted it, went down, scored a touchdown. Now, had that backfired, a lot of people would have said, what in the world was Pat Fitzgerald thinking? So coaches make decisions like this all the time. It just felt like this one was so unnecessary in the moment because, to his point, they had control of the game.
They did. They had a double-digit lead. It's midway through the third quarter. I mean, that was their second double-digit lead of the game. That's what I think is so frustrating about the way that they've lost so many of these games during this stretch in these one-possession games is they've played well. They played well at times, and they just kind of collapse down the stretch, or they get so tight, or they get so worried that they're going to lose, or whatever it is. But they had an 11-point lead midway through the third quarter, and then that happens.
Yeah, it's crazy. 7 straight losses now, all by single-digit margins. That is the longest such streak in the history of college football, which dates back to 1869. It is literally unprecedented what is going on at Nebraska. Lots more on the Huskers coming up. I do want to touch at least on Illinois. Look, Wyoming is not a great team. It doesn't appear to be a great team. Who knows? Craig Bohl's a really good coach, so maybe they get it going.
A lot of players.
But they're deficient at quarterback. I think that was pretty obvious. That being said, this is what it's supposed to look like when you play an overmatched opponent.
Absolutely. That's what it's supposed to be like. You're supposed to have your defense go out and really control the game, and that's what happened in that game, coming up with big plays. We talked about a couple dropped interceptions. They have to get that corrected. But this is a team that they really came out and were able to dominate on both sides of the ball, and that's what you want to see when you're playing an opponent like this.
I also thought it was really encouraging to see Tommy DeVito. I mean, he made that comment afterwards, and he wasn't trying to take a shot, but it kind of reads that way, right? That it was the first game he had not been sacked in. But that was a problem. That's been a huge problem at Syracuse. And so, we talk about fit when you go in the portal, when you come out of the portal. I think that this is showing this could be a really good fit. He seemed to have chemistry with a lot of different receivers, and it did look easy.
Completions to 12 different receivers. And that was apparent when we were at camp, that he was going to be a really good fit for this offense. And I think if you're an Illinois fan, you can't help but to come out of that feeling good. You came out of last season feeling good, and now you carry forward some momentum. You ran it great with Chase Brown. DeVito looked really good. We'll learn a lot more when they play Indiana, but
it'll be a big test for him.
Pretty clear the arrow's pointing up in Champaign, and I think we believe that for quite some time. Let's spin this thing forward to the other piece of news that came out this weekend. It was, frankly, somewhat unusual, I would say. Jim Harbaugh making an announcement Saturday afternoon saying that Cade McNamara and J.J. McCarthy are both QBs they believe can win a championship, and they're not ready to name a starter. So McNamara will start the opener against Colorado State. McCarthy will start week 2 against Hawaii, and then they will decide on a starter going forward. This is unusual for sure, which is par for the course for Jim Harbaugh. It's also a tough spot to be in. I think we need to acknowledge that you have a quarterback who took you to the college football playoff on one hand, who expects to be the starter. And then you have a guy who's a 5-star who everyone in the country wanted, who showed that he can play last year, waiting in the wings. So that's difficult. Like, let's not pretend this is easy, the spot Jim Harbaugh is in. But what do you think of the solution he's come up with?
Listen, I think he telegraphed this to us. He said weeks ago, this is probably going to be a quarterback competition that stretches into the season. And we looked at their schedule and we said, not the world's most daunting non-conference schedule. They'll probably be able to do this. And you know what? They're doing it. Like, I think it's going to be interesting. Okay, so like, what if they start to blow somebody out? Then do they put the other guy in? Do they put the third string guy in? Like, how do you?
See, that's where I want to go with this. Who's actually the backup quarterback in this deal, right?
Right, I don't know. If either of them are backups, right?
Is it the third guy? Because if it's the third guy, I want to be the third guy because I know I'm going to get in the game.
Yeah.
I want to be that guy.
Yeah. So I think it might be.
I think it's less weird than everyone's making it out to be. I get that, like, he shouldn't have called it like we've made a decision because it's not a decision. It's like it's pushing back a decision. But like, look at their schedule. They can do this.
Well, they can do it. But what are they going to learn? Here's my question. Like, what are you going to learn? Vanderbilt went to Hawaii and beat them by 53 points at Hawaii. Okay, so Michigan's going to obliterate Hawaii unless something insane happens.
But what is the right answer here?
I don't know.
So listen,
I don't know. I think you just don't want to make an answer because either one is going to feel wrong in some way.
So how about this? Let's look at it from this perspective. Maybe they feel like they're going to control the game, right? So you don't want your second team quarterback going in with, say, the second team offensive line. They probably are expecting to play a lot of players in both of these games, right? So you want both guys to get an opportunity to play with the one significant minutes. Yeah. And this is one way to ensure it. Now, I know that's a far-fetched idea. It really is. But listen, he did an unbelievable job. Their staff did a great job last year at handling this situation. They know better than we do. There clearly is some other things that are going on. The reason you're going to make sure that JJ gets his fair shot to win the starting job, if that's what he needs to do.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think if you wanted to go with Cade McNamara, you would have already gone with Cade McNamara, right? You already made him a captain. He did all the things you asked him to do. Got this team to the playoff, beat Ohio State, won a Big Ten title. And they already came into this fall camp saying it's an open competition. Like, they talked about it so differently. So don't you think that you are setting it up for J.J. McCarthy to win the starting quarterback job?
I guess. And then what does Cade McNamara do? Like, Cade McNamara has 3 years of eligibility left.
He's done everything he was supposed to.
Football playoff.
Not only that, ever since he started playing quarterback at the high school level, this is what's been going on in his whole career, right? High school, they want to play everybody else. They want to play everybody but him. Now in college, they want to play everybody but him.
Okay, so I think we can all agree this is a very difficult spot to be in, but you're also kind of kicking the can down the road. But at some point, you're going to have to make a decision. And someone
just don't have to make
unhappy.
it this weekend.
You don't, right.
We'll make it 3 weeks from now.
Yeah. It's going to be absolutely fascinating.
It will be.
To follow. Week 1 in the Big Ten is upon us. How about games Thursday, Friday, and Saturday? 13 teams in action. It starts with a conference clash Thursday night in West Lafayette on Fox, Penn State and Purdue. Another conference showdown Friday night on FS1, Illinois and Indiana. We have both Maryland and Nebraska on our air on Saturday, in addition to Minnesota on Thursday. Wisconsin gets Illinois State. Bad news for the Badgers. Backup QB Chase Wolf is out for the year. They just announced that this morning. And, of course, a huge showdown in primetime on Saturday night. Irish and Buckeyes at the Shoe. Let's start there, Howard. There are a
Why are we starting with me?
Of storylines. You might have some. We would like you to reveal the entire Notre Dame defensive game plan right here on our air. Could you do that? Look, there are a lot of storylines.
Yes.
Obviously. The Marcus Freeman one's fascinating,
Yep.
right?
Really
I mean, his first game, regular season game as a head coach comes against his alma mater. How about Jim Knowles, the new defensive coordinator at Ohio State? This is the second straight game he's had to prepare for Notre Dame because they played him in the bowl game when he was at Oklahoma State. Where do you want to start? What interests you the most here?
To me, it starts off the field with Mickey Marotti, right? To me, getting this team prepared to be able to play at this level week one is very difficult. And you think about last year, and I'm talking about them being aggressive at the point of attack and being as tough as they needed to be. One of the questions they've been trying to answer from a national perspective is people didn't feel like they were very tough, particularly in the Michigan game. So that's something that they had to get corrected, and they went all spring, they went all summer, and that's what they were tasked with, trying to get prepared for this Notre Dame team, because this Notre Dame defensive front is really good. So they're going to give them some problems, but
got some talent in the secondary, too.
Yeah, they might have one or two guys back there. We all know, but it's
Sounds
just
familiar.
one of those. It's just one of those things where this is a tough matchup for Notre Dame to have to go on the road. But for Notre Dame, it's like nobody's giving them a shot at winning this game, so they can just go out and be as aggressive as they need to be.
Yeah, I think what I'm most interested from Ohio State is very similar. It's the two sides of the same coin about the toughness, but also the defense specifically. I mean, they gave up so many big plays. They were a step behind so many critical moments against the good teams. And there's just not going to be that many games where we're going to see if they've taken that real step forward. And this is going to be one where you're going to have those moments that are going to stress this defense, and we're going to see how much that impact is from Jim Knowles. And Oklahoma State was terrific. I mean, they were really fun to watch. I know that, fans in other conferences will be like Big 12 offenses and Big 12 defense, but like they were really, really good and physical, and they were not giving up these big plays. So I'm just curious to see when we can see in those few moments, and Notre Dame does try for that, what we see out of the Buckeyes.
Right. I mean, if you could build a legitimate offense, or legitimate defense, I should say, in the Big 12, given the offenses they go against, that speaks volumes about how good you are. I think the issue here is he does not have time to build one in Columbus. The expectation is, Ryan Day said it, the expectation is a top 10 defense, not 3 years from now, not sometime in the future, now. And that's challenging to do, although they have got a boatload of talent.
And Coach Knowles' response to that was, I wish I'd been challenged with having a top 5 defense.
Yeah.
It's no question that the players are there. The players are on the roster to make the plays. They're really talented now at the safety position. Those guys are all healthy. So they should be able to slow this Notre Dame passing attack down. But to me, it's not taking as many chances as you had to take when you were at Oklahoma State. It's one thing when you're trying to bring players from all over the place, trying to confuse folks. When you have some of the players that they have in that secondary, particularly at the linebacker position as well, just forget it, the entire defense, you should be able to just line up and control the game because of the talent that you have.
Well, and we've talked about this a lot, right, about like what was missing from that defense last year. You didn't have the Chase Young type. You didn't have the Bosa type. I mean, Larry Johnson has said that he expects an alpha dog to emerge from that defensive line group. So, I mean, we need to see stuff like that as well. But you're absolutely right that that's the way you set the tone. That's the way the defensive identity is going to be at Ohio State as compared to Oklahoma State.
Irish have largely had their way with the Big Ten of late. They've won 5 of their last 6 matchups against the conference, including last year beating Purdue and Wisconsin. How about Purdue battling Penn State? This is just an enormous game to me because it is a conference game and it's 2 teams with really high hopes. Penn State trying to get back on track after going 11-11 the last 2 years, and Purdue trying to build off what was a very good year last year. And I think anyone who, we were at all these camps, there is no reason to think that they cannot compete for a Big Ten West championship. What stands out to you about this one?
I'm also all in on Purdue. I think Aiden O'Connell has a chance to be the second best quarterback in the Big Ten. I think he is terrific. I think he is a 6-year guy. He's experienced. You want that in the Big Ten. And you also want to be a quarterback in Jeff Brom's system because you get to throw it all over the field. Yeah. But like they always have those receivers emerge. They always put up insane numbers, and they always put a lot of stress on this defense. And they're going to put a lot of stress on Penn State's defense. We have question marks at a number of different levels and positions in this defense. So I'm excited to see that. I think this is a huge opportunity for Purdue with the way their schedule falls to really contend in the West. And this is probably their toughest crossover game. They get them at home, and they get Penn State with a lot of questions they got to figure out. So I think you got to be pretty high on Purdue coming into this and on this offense and the improvements that we've seen defensively over the course of Brom's tenure.
Yeah, I think Purdue is in a great position right here. I think when you look at Penn State, they still have had issues running the football. There's always been an issue. Yes, they have a talented running back room, but if the guys up front aren't taking care of the line of scrimmage, it's not really going to be as effective as it needs to be. You look at Manny Diaz on the defensive side, he's going to have his hands full. Anytime the Brom brothers have an opportunity to really scheme you up, and that's what they've been doing. They've had a lot of time to work on what they plan to see in this Penn State defense. There's only one Joey Porter Jr. out there. There's only one. So you can go pick on a lot of other guys, but they have some matchup issues that they're going to have. And just by the sheer way of their ability to make plays and just how comfortable Aiden O'Connell is right now and confident in himself and his skill set, if that offensive line gives him the time he needs, he's going to find that open receiver, and that's going to spell trouble for Penn State.
That is a really tough opening assignment as a defensive coordinator. You're replacing a lot of star power off of that defense to last year, and now you have to face one of the best offensive minds in college football in Jeff Brom, and you have to do it on the road. And oh, by the way, for Penn State, 12th time in the last 13 seasons, they have open conference play on the road.
This could be a huge game for Mustipher. Getting him back healthy, hopefully he's as close to 100% as he can be, because he can be a difference maker inside. I'm talking about inside because that's where quarterbacks hate pressure in their face. Yeah, coming off the edge is tough, but when they can see that three technique coming at them, that creates a little bit of an issue.
And everyone's going to be watching this game, by the way.
Yes.
Because we're all going to be starved for
much in the
football.
same way everyone watched Northwestern and Nebraska. This will be another game where the whole college football community, it feels like, will be talking about and commenting on the game. I do want to mention Illinois and Indiana because, look, I just think there's a heightened importance on conference games right away. Right, you're Northwestern. You're 1-0 in the Big Ten right now. Purdue or Penn State, one of those teams will be 1-0. Illinois and Indiana trying to do the same thing. From Indiana's point of view, they didn't win a conference game last year, so this is a huge chance to make a statement at home. The flip side, Howard, is Illinois's got a game under their belt. Indiana does not. How big a factor is that going into this game?
I think when you think about Illinois, right, even though it's Wyoming and their opponent that they went out and really dominated, they still have had an opportunity to go out and play. They know who they are and what they need to correct. Indiana's going to go through this process in the first quarter, second quarter, trying to figure out who they need to be, what adjustments need to be made, where Illinois has already done that. There's a lot of pressure, I think, even from the players and also the coaches' standpoint, because they don't want what happened 2 years ago to be a fluke, right? Last year they had the issues as far as being health was concerned and weren't able to pull out games. But 2 years ago, this team was unbelievable. And they're trying to get back to that. And the only way to do that is start winning right now. And this first game against Illinois sets up well for them, an opportunity for them to go out and get that done.
Yeah, interested to see what we get out of the quarterback position. They also have just so many young players. I mean, this recruiting class was kind of like the fruits of that 2020 season and the success there. So they're going to have a lot of guys that are probably going to get onto the field early as freshmen. So like you said, I mean, breaking in with a Big Ten game right out of the gate, I think it's going to be a challenge.
And two new coordinators, Walt Bell, Chad Wilt. I mean, man, it's tough. I do think being at home, I think kind of the enthusiasm that will surround that night game, all that stuff definitely helps them. Illinois has got a short week, although if you're going to have a short week, the beginning of the year that is the time to do it because you can get a lot of that hay in the barn early.
And I think one of the things you also have to think about the mechanics of how this game is actually going to operate from Indiana's standpoint, because, you know, Rod Carey will be up in the box helping Coach Allen out as far as what needs to happen as far as game plan wise is concerned, because Coach Allen's going to be calling the defense. So he's not necessarily going to be as dialed in as he's been in previous years on the offensive side. So there's some things that they still have to get corrected. And Walt Bell, last time he was here was with Maryland. Now he's got, 2 quarterbacks to pick from right now. And then, Maryland, he had 6 guys he had to go through. But he's really talented as well when you talk about coordinating. But how is all of this going to work in their first game?
Yeah, Connor Bazelak had a nice day when we were there at camp. He gives him a little different dimension than Missouri transfers. So feels like that might be the direction they go, but you got Jack Tuttle there as well.
Tuttle's done
so
well.
He certainly has done well for them. That, again, really interesting conference game on Friday night. Thursday, Minnesota takes the field to open the season under the lights against New Mexico State. It's Big Ten football, sponsored by Hampton by Hilton, Thursday, 9 Eastern on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Interesting sidebar on that one. Jerry Kill, who of course was for many years the coach of Minnesota, is the head coach of New Mexico State. You may remember from a few years ago, he had some somewhat unflattering things to say about P.J. Fleck. To his credit, Fleck has really taken the high road on this whole thing. He said, I absolutely expect to shake Jerry's hand after the game. And so that's going to be a story. I don't think there's any question it's not going to be. The truth of the matter is, for Minnesota, New Mexico State is not the destination game this year. This is a team with really high expectations and high hopes coming into the year, and they hope this is the first step of what could perhaps be a Big Ten West championship caliber team. What are you interested in seeing aside from all the other stuff going on?
I'm really anxious to see this quarterback situation, right? Kurt Shiraka back. I know that the team they're facing is not going to give them necessarily a challenge. At least we don't expect that to happen. But I want to see timing. I want to see the ball, coming out, hitting the receivers in stride, throwing guys open. Those are the kind of things I want to see because, to me, everything hinges on this team, starts at the quarterback position. And Tanner Morgan was unbelievable a couple of years ago. He's got to get close to that once again. And I think this team gets an opportunity to fight for that Western Division crown.
Yeah, I think so too, and this is really the tone setter. I think what I'm looking for too, what made Tanner Morgan so effective that year with Kirk Ciarrocca as his OC was how efficient he was. I mean, he was like having perfect games. And you know what else that team had? They could run the ball. They had great receivers, obviously pro receivers, but they can run the ball this year. They don't get decimated by injuries at the running back position. I think that opens some stuff up for them. So I would just like to see all that stuff get going, get that all rolling, get it working, and then we can talk about Big Ten play when we get closer to that.
Oh, that offensive line was so great last year, and I mean they had 5 different running backs go over 100 yards rushing. They lost Mo Ibrahim in the opener. He looked really good when we were in camp, and it looked like they had replaced. I mean, they have 4 offensive linemen they had to replace starters off of last year's team, and it felt like that group, physically at least, looked the part. So, no, there are incredibly high expectations, no doubt, with this Minnesota team coming off a 9-win campaign from a year ago. And, again, don't face Michigan, don't face Ohio State. What about Michigan State? This was the story of the year in the Big Ten last year. The preseason last place pick in the East ends up being a team that plays in the New Year's Six. Now there are expectations surrounding them this year. They bring Peyton Thorne back. The defense has to get better. What are you most interested in seeing against Western Michigan?
Yeah, I think definitely the passing defense. We talked about that a lot last year. Like that needs to improve. They've got some guys that they pulled out of the portal again that they're really excited about that we're going to see start. It's Peyton Thorne's team. This is very different than coming into a season off a quarterback competition. So excited to see what that ownership and leadership looks like from him. But overall, it's Mel Tucker, it's the program, it's everyone being excited about them. How do you handle that when it's the season after that and everyone's expecting you to do the same, if not better? There's been a lot of shine and a lot of conversation about them still. And as if that, Mel's going to hit in the portal again and they're going to beat Michigan again. Like there's just a lot of pressure, I think, that comes around with that, where a lot of things did go their way. And I don't know if they're going to be able to replicate all of those things, but they're going to try, and now they have to handle success. And we're going to have to see and learn how this program does that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point when you talk about being able to handle success, because sometimes as young people, heck, adults, we can't handle success sometimes. So now all of a sudden everybody's patting them on the back, telling them just how great they are. They still have a lot to prove, and they're still a team that's growing. They still have guys that they're bringing in, as you mentioned, out of the portal. But I want to see them run the football, right? Kenneth Walker's not coming through the door. We all know that. And I think this is going to be more of a running back by committee that they're ultimately going to have to use. I don't think they're going to be relying upon one guy. And actually, that may be a benefit for them down the line as they continue to get better.
It's interesting. Everyone's optimistic when we're at camp, but we had a chance to talk with Mel Tucker quite a bit because they were going through a walkthrough, and so he came up and pointed out a lot of guys to us. And he feels really good about Jalen Berger and Jarek Broussard at running back. Again, I don't think he's saying anyone's Walker here. I mean, Kenneth Walker was a special back, won the Doak Walker Award. They feel like they're okay at running back. Interesting side note on that one. Jeff Thorne, Peyton Thorne's dad, is the offensive coordinator at Western Michigan.
It's a little awkward.
Yeah, that is a fascinating.
And Western Michigan's best player now Reed is playing for Michigan State.
Yeah, and Thorne was headed to Western Michigan early in his
a lot of intertwined storylines there.
Yes. Outside of the quarterback story, your focus against Colorado State is on what, Howard?
I want to see the run game again. Defensively, they have to replace a lot. You talk about edge rushers, but I think Blake Corum is going to be the guy that I believe he is. He's 12 pounds heavier, looks physical, looks like he's ready to take that next step. So the run game I want to see, but I know that defense has got a lot of questions, and I think they've got some people over there that are going to make plays for him.
Yeah, and obviously you've got different coordinators on both sides. So I think defensively we expect that it will be schematically very, very similar. But yeah, who are going to be those guys? I mean, I think, even this time last year, probably there was a lot of excitement around David Ojabo, but I don't know if we knew that he was going to have the season that he did. I don't know if we knew that Aiden Hutchinson was going to be a Heisman finalist. So seeing who those guys are and understanding that position, the pressure that the pass rushers put is really important to the defense. So seeing who emerges, I think.
And we mentioned this in the context of the quarterback decision. This might be the cushiest non-conference schedule in the Big Ten. I'm not even necessarily sure it's by design. I mean, you do this so far in advance. You don't necessarily know how teams are going to be, but they got a lot of time to experiment and to figure out the rotations. And I think in a season of transition where you still are expected to compete at a really high level and maybe even win the Big Ten, but you do have some unknowns, this is kind of the perfect setup for you that you can ramp up and you can figure out the answers to some of those questions when, frankly, you can play below your best and still win games.
One real quick note, really quickly, when we talk about this team and their schedule, right? Are the quarterbacks really going to be put in position where they're going to have to throw the ball and make good decisions?
I don't know.
Right.
I mean,
they should be able to just turn around and hand the ball off. That's what they did last year. When they wanted to run the ball and they wanted to figure it out, we're going to fix the run game. We'll worry about the pass in a couple weeks.
Yeah, hopefully.
No, I think there's so many. The quarterback thing is like endlessly.
Yeah, you told us we're not allowed to say the most interesting thing that we want to watch in this game. The quarterback.
We already talked about it. I'm trying to expand the palette of what we're discussing.
So interested.
Okay, I'm just fascinated by the what now. I mean, so they come home, they're playing North Dakota, they're on a short turnaround in terms of the travel. I mean, they had to come all the way from Europe. They're obviously disappointed with the result against Northwestern. Whether or not it will be, I mean, look, their fans are incredibly supportive. They will be supportive, no doubt, of this program. Whether they're supportive of every component of it, I think is a question mark. I mean, I just think it's a fascinating Saturday coming up in Lincoln.
And you'll notice Northwestern's not playing this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you had an option to rearrange the stuff and to give yourself a little more time to come off of it. But Nebraska didn't, and thank goodness it's not North Dakota State, and it's North Dakota instead.
Yes.
So hopefully it is a get-right game. It's been a while since this team has won a game, and I think you just got to get back in the rhythm and see what it takes to do that, because it does become a habit. I mean, Casey Thompson, first half, really up until the long scramble play, had a great game. I mean, he is capable of that, and again, we need to see growth from them on the defensive side. I also would like to see how Mark Whipple and the offensive play calling changes, if anything, from Scott Frost, kind of calling them out in the post game and saying they need to be more creative in the Big Ten. Kind of. Reading between the lines. No, I mean, he very much specifically
I don't know,
did.
you need the qualifier.
So what is that? Does that play into anything about how they approach this offensively? I don't know.
I mean, that was fascinating, right? I mean, for him to say we need to be
Yeah.
more creative in this league.
So here's what's interesting, right? They go into this game, they come away with a victory, and they go out and dominate this, right? Do they still know who they are? I don't think they do, but they need some good things to happen.
I agree with you, but I mean, if they could play the worst team on the face of the planet this week, I'd say that's who they should play. Like, and I'm not implying in any way that that's North Dakota. I'm just saying they just need to win. Right? They just, don't you think?
No,
you can prove stuff to yourself against Oklahoma.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
But I think it's, again, it's between the head.
I know, that's what you said.
Yeah.
That is what you said when we walked out of there.
They've got to figure that out. So we'll see.
Yep.
We'll see. I'll be watching, that's for sure.
We will definitely.
I would hope so.
Definitely. Our big stat brought to you by Gatorade. The Big Ten, one of 3 conferences that has had 3 different teams make the CFP through the years: Ohio State, Michigan State, and Michigan. Buckeyes, of course, the only Big Ten team to win it all, capturing the first ever CFP back in the 2014 season. Interested to get thoughts from both of you. I can start with you, Nicole. Who do you see as realistic CFP competitors here in the Big Ten this year? Who's got a shot at it?
Well, it feels like it's Ohio State and Michigan, the teams that have made it, and Michigan just went last year. Everyone's penciling the Buckeyes in. It feels like one of those years where we're penciling 3 teams in. We're penciling Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State in some order into the CFP, but it just feels like there's certain rosters that are cut above everyone else. They're going to play the schedule that they need to. I mean, obviously Ohio State's opening with Notre Dame, but they'd be fine no matter what based on the Big Ten schedule.
Right.
It just feels like, you have to have that type of national respect. You have to have that type of talent, so much blue chip talent on that roster. And you've honestly kind of need to been there before. That's what was last year. We had 2 new teams, and it was really exciting because it's just been kind of this revolving door for the same couple of programs because they can recruit to that. They can say, well, we're one of the 6 or so teams that was always in the mix for the national championship. So if you want to play for that and develop as a pro, come here. So I think that's natural. I think that's where you are. Obviously Ohio State certainly seems to have the edge. We think we're going to see some incredible explosiveness out of this offense. But yeah, I mean, I think it's those 2. I mean, again, until someone in the West beats the East champion, I don't know if people are going to put any of those teams into the mix until the very end.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. It's Ohio State and Michigan right now. And Michigan have opportunities to continue to get better as a team if we believe they're as good as we think they are. They've got to figure out the quarterback situation, right? That has to be done. You're not going to go to the CFP juggling quarterbacks. It's a tough duty to make happen. But, they are talented. They're not as talented probably from a star standpoint on the defensive unit. But when we left there, they were really excited just about how many players that they would be able to roll in. And they thought that they could do so much more because when you have 2 dynamic edge rushers, you probably need to set your defense so those edge rushers make all the plays. Not having those guys now forces them in a situation where now everybody has to be a big part of that defense, and that gives them that opportunity to be there. But as you mentioned, Ohio State, it's just way too much talent, too explosive. In a league now, college football, it's about scoring points. Ohio State has the ability to do it.
You were talking about there's almost feels like it's a fait accompli with 3 of these programs coming into the year: Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. Is that just a function of them being those brands? I mean, it felt like it was a fait accompli with Clemson going into last year, and then it was pretty obvious from the get-go that they were not at that level. So is it that people are just giving those brands the benefit of the doubt because that's what we do, or do you just kind of feel like it's more than brand? I mean, they've recruited at a different level, all of them. You look through these rosters and you're like, wow. Is that why you think it's those 3, or is it a combination?
Yes, I think it's a combination of both of those things. But this sort of goes to you do need to be thought of pretty highly entering the year to be in that category, to be in those games that we think we're all watching. Obviously, the CFP, they don't do their first poll and rankings until midseason, so it's possible that they view these teams differently. Yeah. But I do think it's important that that the eyes are on you. Think about Utah this year. We're talking about Utah as a potential playoff team. They're very similar to the team that finished last year, but we didn't talk about them that way. You kind of need to be in the conversation, and then yes, the rosters. I went back and forth on who I would think is going to win the ACC. Well, you know what? I went with Clemson because of the talent on that roster. So I do think a lot of people base it on that. And if you look at the run of national champions over X amount of years, it's a lot of 4- and 5-star recruits that get developed into the best of college football.
Yeah, I think you look at Clemson, that's another team that they really can shock a lot of people this year because they just have a loaded roster and people are down on them because of last season. But I think that will be right back to what they're accustomed to doing.
Yes, it's the old good team with something to prove.
Yeah.
and they certainly do. Well, it's going to be fascinating, obviously, to watch it. It's just so exciting that it starts unfolding really this weekend. And we see. Wrapping things up on Big Ten today, we solicited some of your Twitter questions, have a few that we will get to here. This first one comes from Justin Banner. Wants to know, what is Maryland's ceiling this year? Howard, we saw them in camp. What do you think?
I like this Maryland team. I like them a lot. I think the challenge becomes, can they knock off one of two of the four? Talk about Michigan State, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. Can they beat two of those teams? That's what they're going to need to do, and I think they have the ability to do it. But they can't give any of those games away in the non-conference. They have to run the non-conference schedule. But I think this is a really good team. I'm excited about them.
I felt the same, although, I kind of looked off, can you pick off maybe it's Purdue, Wisconsin, right? Like just to get to a certain win total. Yeah. 9 wins feels possible if everything goes right for this Maryland team. They were top 15 passing offense last year. I think Talia and his weapons, I think they're going to be pretty good. I think people are going to realize at least midway through the season that this is a better than we think Maryland team.
Those weapons, last year they had a great passing offense. Talia set the school record for passing yards last year, and 2 of those guys were down, and Ja'Shawn Jones and Dante Demas, and now you bring in Jacob Copeland, who was Florida's leading receiver last year. You still got Rakim Jarrett. They're going to be able to throw it around.
Yeah. I picked him as like a very dark horse Heisman guy. I know that would take a lot for Maryland's quarterback to win the Heisman, but he's going to have the numbers.
No, absolutely, and he certainly has the name recognition.
We know how to spell it.
That's
we know
part
how
of
to spell it.
This one from Michael. He wants to know, are the Cats for real? Or is Nebraska's defense that bad? What do you think, Howard?
Well, I think it's somewhere in the middle. Ultimately, right? I think it's somewhere in the middle. Nebraska defensively really struggled in this game. They couldn't slow down the run. Northwestern had their way with them up front. So I think we have to take a wait and see approach as we continue to watch this Northwestern team. I think they'll get better. Obviously, after this performance, can they continue to go down that course?
Yeah, I'm going to say that I'm going to put it on Nebraska more for now. So we'll have to see. I want to see the next time Northwestern plays a conference opponent. But I remember us overreacting last year to Illinois. And obviously they had a good season last year. But, we kind of thought maybe they could be better than they were because of the dramatic comeback against Nebraska and everything that went into the way that they won that game in week 0. So this year, week 0, I'm not overreacting. I'm going to remain concerned about Nebraska and cautiously optimistic about Northwestern.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say Northwestern's probably better. They did not have it in them to do that last year, no matter who they played. I mentioned second time in 55 games they've gone over 500 yards of offense. They played UMass, Indiana State. In that stretch, they played some bad teams, and they haven't been able to do this. So give them some credit. How about this last one from Friday Night Lights? Who starts at QB for Rutgers by the time conference play begins? He wants you to say Gavin Wimsatt so
I'll say
desperately, Howard.
Gavin Wimsatt.
Let it be said?
Yeah.
So let it be done.
Okay, so here...
this will be interesting.
Okay, so why do you say that?
I think if he's the guy, the future, if he's the quarterback who's going to take this offense to a different level than it's been, in how many years? I think you're going to go to him at some point. Maybe you're not ready to do it right at the start of the season, but in a few weeks.
Yeah, I still think that this is a good football team, right? So I think you go in with the experience. You got to try to win some games. Not try. You got to go out and win games. I think they'll be better than they were last year. So you need to make sure that the quarterback position is solidified.
I'll tell you, he is a big-time arm. He threw a few passes when we were there.
It's
effortless.
I think it's just about you making sure you're putting him in a good situation as you ease him in, but I think you're going to ease him in by then.
That's where it's hard, though, right? Because offensive line isn't great.
It isn't great, but he can get away from a lot of guys.
Yeah. Hey, continue to send us those Twitter questions. We're going to try to do this periodically here on the show. Ton of fun. Thanks so much for being with us on Big Ten Today. We will see you next time, and I will see you on a special day for the Big Ten Network tomorrow.